Today we're going to be working on a fire with a bow drill. It's one of the oldest fire by friction methods, and it works in a wide range of different weather conditions. If it's wet outside, this is probably one of the best ways to do it because you get enough speed on your drill where you create enough friction where it works way better than if you're using a hand drill. Hand drills work really well in warmer climates and where it isn't quite so damp. As you can see here, it can get kind of damp. Right now we've got a little bit of snow left. It's almost April, and we're going to start working on this. Okay, the thing that we're going to be working on today is this chunk of cedar. It's like the top of a cedar fence post. The reason we're working on this rather than just going out and gathering materials and making right from, as we can see, sticks and limbs and stuff like that, is there's probably a lot of you that might live in the city, and in order to get the materials for this, you might have to go to a lumber supply like Fleet, Home Depot, something like that, and you can get a 4x4 by 8 cedar post, and you can make a whole supply of bow drills. Have lots of material to practice with. So we're going to work on a piece like this so you can see how to do it at home. Okay, the first thing you want to do is split off a few sections of this. And the way I do that is the same way as if I was out in the woods. I just take my knife, put it on top. You want a good quality knife for doing this, or you can use a hatchet. But I always just carry this knife. It's a rigid knife. This I've had probably since I was 12 years old. And it really is a good knife. And just you want to be putting it through as far as you can. Pound as close to the knife as you can, not out on the end of the tip, because that's where you're going to end up breaking it. As you can see, this one is really dry. So we've got our piece, which will probably end up being our fireboard itself. And I'll just take and whittle this down, kind of square it up. It's nice to have your fireboard at least 3 to 4 inches wide. That's what I prefer. This is about as short as I like to go. Usually I like to have them a little bit longer than this. So you don't have to be making fireboards all the time. You can keep making different indentations in there for your spindle to fit into. So you're kind of squaring it up so you end up like with a little board by doing it this way. And it's got a pretty good crack in it, but we can still probably use the one side. I usually like to get this, I use my thumbs and fingers a lot for measuring. I like to have it the thickness of my thumb. That's how thick this board should be. The spindles I make as thick as my pointer finger. And we'll talk about those a little bit more in just a little bit here. We'll finish getting this squared up. Okay, that's getting pretty close. And and then you save all this stuff. Makes really good kindling material for later on. You want to have these as flat as possible so they don't rock back and forth on the ground. This one's already looking pretty good. You can set it on a bench or something. It doesn't rock. That's good. It's nice and flat. Yeah, it's about the right thickness probably. Maybe shave a little bit more off that side. Kind of like, I don't know if people listening have been in Boy Scouts or not, but knife safety is a really important thing. Always be pushing away from your body. You never want to be putting something on your knee and pushing like this because you're going to end up cutting yourself and end up having a lot more problems than just being cold. So we've almost got this one squared up. Getting really close. Okay. You got your fireboard. This isn't really ideal to have a splinter like this, but we're going to work off from this edge. This crack here, you wouldn't want to work off from this, you're going to have problems. But if you use this flat edge, I've made fireboards that are about this width, but you can only use one side for your for your socket on there. Okay, the next piece you're going to want to make is your spindle. Usually I'll just take and work off a corner. Make sure you don't pound into big knots and stuff like that. It's just going to make life a lot more difficult for you. So you want to try to work around the edges of that. Okay. Yeah, that one's a little bit thin, so we're just going to make kindling out of that. Let's see. Once you get good at this too, you can kind of look and see how the grain of the wood is, what's going to work, what isn't going to work. Okay, that should be about right. So then we put that one on the ground, and we'll carve this into a round spindle. And you can use quite a wide variety of woods for this. The ones to stay away from are pine and really soft woods that have a lot of resin in them, because as you'll see later on, they just don't work. You end up with a lot more problems. Cedar's easy to work with. I've used popple. The only wood that with resin I've used is tamarack, and it works. It's not as good as cedar is, that's for sure. You can use tag elder. Use that a few different times. And yeah, there's just a lot of different woods out there. The best thing to do is experiment with what kind of woods you're going to use. Yeah, this is still pretty thick, but we'll get it whittled down. And don't get frustrated when you're doing this, because to get it the first time is pretty rare. I've taught a lot of people how to do this, and there was one guy that was able to do it the first time. But then after that, he could never get it to work. But he didn't practice and keep trying. He just kind of gave up after that. So it's one of those things that takes a lot of practice. Kind of like all fire making skills, if you don't practice, it just doesn't work as good. That's for sure. You're going to run into a lot of problems. Okay, now we've got our spindle whittled down to the size it should be. And another thing, this is just the way I do it, is I try to have the spindle always the same thickness as the board, or roughly the same thickness. So it's in between thumb and finger thickness. Once again, back to the old measuring stick. So that's what I do. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you take one end of your spindle and you make it pointed. And this is the end that goes into your handhold. And usually, this is the way I was taught to do this anyways, is if you take your time and really do a good job on something, usually it works a lot better than if you just clobber something together. So whenever I do this, I try to make it in my mind as I'm doing this, like I'm making a gift for somebody. And if you're making a gift for somebody, you definitely take your time and you make it look nice. And a lot of people might say, oh, that's a waste of time. But you've only got one shot at doing something, you just as well do it right. Okay, so now we've got this down. So we got a point up here. Just like that. Looks like a little pencil, kind of. Okay, the other end, you take and you make a blunt point. Kind of sounds kind of dumb, but that's what you do. So you kind of round it. And like that. Making it kind of round. Once again, it takes a lot of practice to get good at this. And that's why You know, you just don't want to watch videos on YouTube and think, oh, I watched somebody do this. I know I can do it, and then go out. Because I have yet to meet anybody that's ever done that before. It takes practice. Lots of practice. Okay. So you can see on this, it's not as sharp as this point. Kind of, it's more of a rounded point to it. And you kind of keep working on making it even a little bit more like that. Make sure it's centered. Okay. Now you've got the spindle to the point where you're to the next step. Now always make sure it's fairly round. You don't want it crooked or it's going to wobble all over. Good way to do this is if you have a fairly flat surface. Kind of roll it back and forth and see how nicely it rolls. Okay, the next step. Take your fireboard. If you've got a crack in it like this one, go to this edge. Don't use this edge. So you're using the opposite edge like that. You take your spindle, you lay it down. So if you were to have two spindles laying here, you can see that? It's like one spindle width, the next spindle width, and then you tip it like that. And you take and you make a little mark right there with your end of with the blunt end. So you got a little mark in your board. And take your knife, put it into that spot, and just twist it a few times. It'll make an impression in the board. Keep twisting it.